Well, both Republicans and Democrats in Congress say they want to focus on jobs and the economy. Now, U.S. lawmakers have gone home on their summer recesses, and many of them are at home in their districts saying that very thing at this very moment. And yet, what about action? So little action has actually been taken during the last couple of years. The action that we do see often revolves around trying to lower the debt and, quote, take the burden off of our children. Trying to lower the unemployment rate, though, what actions have lawmakers done to do? And Dr. Carnes, I know you've been working on a book about this very topic, how, those elected to represent people aren't always that representative. What have you discovered?
Well, thanks so much for having me. What my research shows is that you're absolutely right. Politicians tend to be drawn overwhelmingly from the most affluent Americans, and people from the working class are almost never the ones making the rules that govern working class people. And that has real consequences for public policy and for the well-being of Americans from all walks of life.
So you have, an extreme lack of working class people actually coming here to Capitol Hill to represent people. So that means a lot of times, I think what you're saying is that some of the policy created actually serves the upper class more than some of the other groups. How does this work? I mean, how do these people keep getting reelected then?
Well, those are two really interesting questions. The first one, so basically, if millionaires were a political party, that party would make up about 3% of American families, but it would have majority control in the U.S. Senate. And if people from the working class, from manual labor jobs, from service industry jobs, if they were a party, they would make up a majority of the electorate. But they would have never had more than 2% of the seats in Congress at any time in the last century. Why does that matter? Well, people from different classes tend to have different opinions about the government's role in the economy. You look at the minimum wage, for instance. On average, somebody who works a minimum wage job is going to support a higher minimum wage than the person who's signing their paychecks. That works the same way across lots of different economic issues, tax policy, the social safety net, and it works the same way for politicians as it does for the rest of us. Politicians from the working class tend to be more supportive of policies that help working class people, unemployment insurance, progressive taxes, and politicians from white-collar or private sector backgrounds tend to be less supportive of those policies. And so at the end of the day, the kinds of economic policies our government enact really reflect the occupational or the social class makeup of Congress. As tilted as it is, that means that the working classes people who care about the working class have to fight tooth and nail to pass anything in Washington.
Yeah, certainly in order to become elected to any office these days, even, more local, city council members seem to have to raise a lot of money, and they're not going to be able to raise a lot of money from those people with minimum wage jobs. You were talking about some numbers there. I want to take a look at some numbers compiled by the Pew Research Center that shows sort of just how unrepresentative Congress actually is. We have, education with people with bachelor's degrees or higher, 92% of House members, 99% of senators, and even though it's only 30% of Americans over 25 years old. Some other numbers that we have here, too, when it comes to wealth. The net worth is over $1 million, nearly 47% of Congress, and only 9% of U.S. households. Some really interesting things. And then, of course, something that's very apparent, and that is gender. 16.8% of Congress is female, even though more than 50% of the total U.S. population is female. And then, of course, that is very similar with race. 8% of Congress is African American, 13% of the U.S. population is, 5% of Congress is Hispanic, 16% of the population is, and 3% of Congress is Asian Pacific American versus 5.2%. So you look there and you see just some really big differences between the makeup of Congress, both in how they look and the socioeconomic backgrounds, and how that differs. I guess I just want to ask you, getting back to my other question, how do these people keep getting reelected?
Well, you're absolutely right to sort of call our attention to those statistics. All of those things matter. Legislators from different classes vote differently. Men and women in our legislatures vote differently. Racial and ethnic minorities in Congress vote differently. The white members. All those things are important. the question of why those inequalities exist, why there are so few women, why there are so few racial minorities, why there are so few working class people in our public offices, is sort of one of the frontiers of research and best practice work right now. And that's still a question mark for political scientists. It could be that, for instance, working class people, as some people often say, voters just don't like working class people. But in my research, I show that actually voters really like working class people, but for some reason they aren't making it to the general election. So what's keeping them out? Is it money? Probably. That's probably a huge part of it. But even before money was as important in politics as it is today, go back to 1901, and Congress was still less than 2% working class like it is today. So there's something else about our political process that makes it really hard for working class people to break into U.S. politics, and that's what I hope to find out in my research in the next few years.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. One of our producers actually took some time to reach out to her Congressman Mike Coffman from the 6th District of Colorado. She said that she's from Littleton, Colorado, and she wanted to discuss the unemployment issue here and ask them simply what he and his fellow members of Congress have been doing to address this issue. Asking what steps have been taken in both the immediate future and the long term to bring these unemployment numbers down, and was wondering if anything will actually be resolved. Congress, of course, on vacation right now for the next 4 or 5 weeks. We haven't heard back. She hasn't heard back from her congressman, but we're going to keep our viewers posted. But I guess that's my final question. We're almost out of time. But I mean, will this pattern change?
Well, not unless something else changes. One of the things we know is that this is one of the oldest and most widespread features of our political process. You can look at any level of government, you can look at any period in American history, and there are almost no working class people at the table in our political institutions. That has real consequences for public policy. And there are organizations trying to change it. The AFL-CIO in New Jersey runs a candidate school for working people.
All right.
Unless those things take off, we're going to look at more of the same. The Millionaires Party is going to stay in power.
All right. Dr. Nicholas Carnes, Assistant Professor of Public Policy at Duke University.